All right.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
It's always fun with technology.
You wanted to hear something?
Well, a little late to the game now.
That's okay. A little soundtrack to the presentation.
There you go. You can do this. Go, Steve.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, so I apologize for the delay. And so what I wanted to do is, we've spent a lot of time talking about the town center area, and and when I did my update for economic development, town center was one of the key areas that we were going to focus in on. And as part of that, we actually created the Economic Development Advisory Technical Panel, and we've met several times. They have actually made town center and the revitalization of town center a priority. And so it's one of the things that we started just really kind of getting in and discussing and trying to figure out, like, what's the best strategy of moving forward. And one of the things they had asked me to do was, kind of what are the things that we've done, what documents are out there. And so we put a package together for that group and included this master plan plus other things that we've done. And it really started putting a focus on, when you look at the end of the plan itself, there was an implementation schedule. And I really started taking a deep dive into the implementation schedule and trying to understand, since we've adopted this plan, have we ever gone through and done an update to the council on the implementation of this actual plan, of the steps that were outlined back in 2015? And I'm not aware that's been done. And so what I wanted to do was take the opportunity to kind of, take this piece of work, because this is actually a really nice plan. I think, there was a lot of effort that went into it. And there's been effort that's gone into implementing this plan. And so I think this was a good opportunity to look at that, and then also talk about, other things that could be done that I think would help affect this plan better, so we can do things in a little bit more strategic way. And so when you look at the plan, it really did address several areas as it relates to revitalization, infill, and redevelopment. And those are three different things I just wanted to focus on. Revitalization generally deals with taking existing structures that have useful life, maybe having adaptive reuse. I would say something like Spanish Village is an example of that. We have infill development, which we can look at the hotel as being infill. But when you look around town center, we still have a lot of infill sites that are vacant properties. And then redevelopment are sites that really have passed their useful life. And, in the plan that we currently have, places like Los Portales kind of fit that mold. And so is there an opportunity, where we look at absolute, redevelopment, or even town hall, when we look at the ultimate build out of town hall, is this an opportunity for a redevelopment? So I thought the best way to kind of approach this, and I hope it's all visible, is just to kind of take the schedule that was right out of the town center or the village center master plan. And in the way it's color coded is the green are things that we put some significant effort into, and we've done some things. Red is things that we haven't really put significant effort into. And so when we start on the first page here, the first thing we looked at was to celebrate the points of arrival into the village center. And obviously significant expense and energy and time was put into looking at, how we do that. And the arches was part of the recommendation that was part of the master plan. I will say, though, that other things that were included or that were included in the master plan that should have been done potentially with the arches probably still needs to be examined and evaluated. And we can talk about those things when it relates to later, and that's pedestrian connections, which is something that we're already addressing with as far as safety goes, and additional sidewalks and some other stuff that really highlights those areas and makes them more accessible. The next one was the decreasing entry drives along Tom Darlington Drive. Again, when you look, there's nothing that's really been done to address this. And if you specifically look up and down Tom Darlington, the drive situation has mostly remained the same. Though again, as we look at, and there's an important thing that we're working on, and that is the pedestrian crosswalk study. And those crosswalk study that's been completed, or is in process, I should say, hasn't necessarily just looked at just the crosswalks. It's really looked at Tom Darlington and Cave Creek in totality and how we deal with safety in those. And so again, it's going to give us an opportunity to start looking at some of these other things as we look at safety of moving vehicles in and out and how that intermixes with pedestrians. Establishing hierarchy of street topologies. We do have that in our current general plan. And so I did highlight it green, though in talking with Stacy, there obviously, as we go through the general plan update, we really need to take a look at that specific to the town center, and maybe there's a better way to categorize how these streets are labeled. I don't know, Stacy, if you have anything additional to add to that.
No, you said it well. I think that in our minds, we know what those streets are and what their purposes are, but I think it's always good to have it clearly defined in any policy document.
Thanks. The next was, build upon the village center's pedestrian and bicycle friendly design. I think we've done some fairly nice things inside the garden space, but when you look really at the totality of town center, just the fact that we're going through and doing a pedestrian safety study of how to get across streets and how to access it really shows that we really haven't done much, but we're getting to the point where we're going to start working on that. But when we look internally, we still have a lot of issues with non-connected streets. Especially when we look at ADA, there's a lot of areas where we probably need to start addressing as we look at the future. Create additional parking opportunities. With the gardens, we reconfigure the parking. One of the complaints we continuously get is parking. It's one of the things that we're continually working on. One of the things that we've been bringing up is the idea of utilizing Tom Darlington and Cave Creek for potential future parking, which would help solve a lot of issues, including how it would fit in with the pedestrian safety study that we're doing right now. And then fostering the growth of existing village center, identify and pursue key anchored projects. And I think we've done this by default. I don't know if there's been a true outreach program, but we've done the best at being able to take opportunities that have come to us, and actually, obviously the hotel coming in is one of those. And having Bruce come in and do what he did with Spanish Village has definitely been great. And but this is one of the things when we look at economic development, business development is going to be a key. And again, talking with Economic Development Advisory Group, we do have some brokers on that. And this is one of the things that actually was brought up is our ability to put together a better game plan on business development and outreach to the types of tenants we want to see here. And again, it really focuses in, and what makes that difficult is we focused in on local businesses. And so, we don't necessarily want to go targeting the Burger Kings to come to town center, but so we're going to be very thoughtful about how we approach that. But it is something that we definitely are actively getting engaged in. And then to help to foster the growth of existing village center business establishments. That's something I think we've always continuously worked on, whether it was through the last year through COVID or even prior to. I think there's been a lot of attention on being able to work with our businesses. One thing I'd like to say is that at the start of this matrix, again, it did identify that there should be a committee that actually helps guide this implementation. That's something that hasn't happened. So again, I just want to say that we're going to be using the Economic Development Advisory Group. And so we've touched on a lot of these types of discussions already. But I think in general, the town has done a fairly decent job at reaching out to businesses and the existing, but we can always do better, and having Alex on board and putting together better communications is revitalize existing commercial areas and buildings, redevelopment, rehabilitation, and adaptive reuse. This is one of those ones where it's difficult, and sometimes it's easy to get to the low-hanging fruit. But when you look around town center, we have some buildings that have been in a static state for a long time, and even Spanish Village remained in that position. And and I think through his vision, Bruce Raskin was able to see something in that and was able to make something happen there, and really did a great job at retenanting and being able to revitalize that. But from my perspective, there's a lot of, we look at there's a lot of other things that we need to focus on, and there's a lot of infill sites that haven't been developed ever. And you wonder why, and it's been in a community like this, in a town center, do these sites sit vacant? And so, and then again, looking at places like Los Portales, it's again, something that's stagnant for a long time, and we're just not seeing the commercial investment that we need to see. So, and when you look at the purple on here, purple to me represents, in this key is that these are things that we really have a hard time addressing with the tools that we have. And this really relies on the private sector coming in and having a vision and being able to fix things. But if you go from community to community to community, they all have tools that they've been able to put in place, whether incentive packages or redevelopment areas, that have allowed them to have additional tools to spur revitalization and redevelopment. And again, Gilbert being probably the poster child for that right now, and what they've been able to do with their heritage district. And then develop, recruit, campaign targeting specific restaurants. Again, that falls back into the outreach. And so, I think we've done that to some extent, and we've brought some folks in, and I know Gary's done a good job of bringing in some perspectives, but we can always do a better job at letting all the restaurants know that we're available, and that there's opportunity here. And then again, going back to establishing, and this is a key one, that the Village Center as a great neighborhood. And we've always looked at this as kind of a commercial core, but when we went through the exercise here, I think using the term neighborhood was extremely important. And so when we look at how we deal with town center, it really does connect to the residential components. And again, I'm really excited when I went through and saw what we were doing with Rick Engineering on the pedestrian walkways, because it really tied into the connection points back to the existing residents, to the community. But at the same time, when we look at areas like this in great neighborhoods, they involve a great mix of uses. And while we have the view coming in, I think there's a great opportunity for the town to start looking at alternative mixes and alternative carefree type lifestyles that could exist inside the town center. And so those are some of the things we're going to focus on. And one of those is going to be, kind of going through this, I don't want to call it a branding or a visioning, but really starting with this optical visioning process where we can really hone in on what a great neighborhood looks like for the town center. And we'll start that, that process probably over the next month or two here, and hopefully take that in through the general plan update when we start looking at recommendations for general plan use in land use and zoning. The other one is purchasing available properties, and we are really hamstrung by state law when it comes to having a real estate strategy. Most communities in their downtown areas or their town centers or in key commercial areas have redevelopment areas, again, as a tool. And redevelopment areas give you the special ability to be able to buy and sell and have real estate strategies for those specific areas. And so, for instance, if we were to sell a town hall, we would have to just go to highest bid. We couldn't go to best project. Versus downtown Phoenix or Scottsdale, where if they had a piece of property and they wanted to redevelop that property, they can go with the best project based on a submittal of RFP. So we've really been hamstrung that way. And I'm going to get back into redevelopment areas, and I know I'm kind of teeing that up right now, but it does fit in with the conversation of where we sit and things and the efforts that we've been able to put into redevelopment or into the revitalization plan. And then modify existing land use policies. I know this is a continuous thing as well, and it's green and I know it's one thing that Stacy's really looked into, and in this conversation we have a lot and internally here. And again, you just can't look at changing land uses without really understanding, kind of the context of what we're trying to create. And it kind of goes back to this idea of putting together a great neighborhood. And so again, as we go through, I think the next 24 months, this is something that we definitely can just roll right in with a general plan update, and looked at the idea of maybe even having some better redevelopment planning as a component to that. I don't know, Stacey, if you have anything to add to that as well.
No, those are great comments. I think I agree with you in the terminology of neighborhood for town center. But what's important based on just what you were describing, this particular strategy, is making sure we find that right balance and understanding through the economics of how much of a certain use and type of use we want to see in balance with our needs as, as Gary always mentions, a town that, operates on retail tax revenues and restaurant revenues and things like that. So, but I agree. I think that, town center, neighborhood, land uses, the synergy of what happens in that space is important, and you have to find that balance.
Foster characteristics that set the village center apart from other places in the valley. This is something I think we struggle with. Is everybody has this idea that Carefree is different, but nobody can describe why Carefree is different. And so it's one of the things I think as we start really, it's going to be an organic conversation, but it's something that we really do need to do as far as a community and looking at ways that we can separate ourselves. And I think creating a unique neighborhood, and that neighborhood concept will go a long way to doing that versus just, piecemealing things, which I think we've done more in the past. So, and hence the village center's prominence through iconic imagery. Again, this kind of is an interesting one. We did the arches, but when you looked at the plan, there was a big component to public art. And though we do have public art in the gardens, we do not have a formalized public art program. I've had a few conversations with some folks about the idea of, how we incorporate more public art as it goes into our right of way beyond just the gardens. And as we kind of looked at that through, but art is always a great way for people to stop and go, wow, I'm someplace different, especially if you're coming down Tom Darlington or Cave Creek Road, and all of a sudden you see predominance of these iconic imageries, whether it's in a traffic circle or at an entryway. It really does help set the stage. So it's one of the things I think that's extremely important, but we haven't really done much, and I think we could do a lot better job. Enhancing the prominent or through imagery. We just thought that create incentives. Again, incentives go back to the idea of what can we offer developers and users as a community. And again, without having a redevelopment area in place, it's really hard to put any kind of public resources towards any kind of private projects. And we can look at ways to build it and they will come, but it's a lot easier to build it and they will come when you can enter into development agreements where the private sector commits to doing things when you commit to doing things, and they put dollars to where you put dollars. Work with businesses to improve the physical presentation in their storefronts. We haven't really touched this one, and again, now we're treading in the personal areas of businesses. I'm not saying this is something we can't do. I'm just saying it's something we haven't really formally addressed. But one of the things that we have done is reached out to some organizations that do business training, and there's some communities that have hired some of these organizations. Most of them are nonprofits that, like a Local First, for example, where they actually have business education classes. And so I did receive a proposal from Local First. I'll be evaluating that over the next couple of weeks, and we'll start looking at ways we can, implement that. But again, this kind of comes down to, a budgetary thing. And I'm a firm believer that if we go down this type of road, that any businesses would need to be able to participate financially and have to make commitments to time to be able to do these things. That's one of the things we're going to start looking at. And this goes beyond just merchandising in their windows, but how they even present themselves online. And there's a lot of whole other types of things we can do to help these businesses out. Encourage exploration by improving wayfinding and signage. You'll be getting another presentation after this presentation that kind of falls into this. And again, this is one of the things I think is extremely important. It's been pointed out. And last year, we actually entered into a contract with Kimley Horn to do wayfinding signage, actually to do a whole signage master plan. And so I think that's a first good step. And so we definitely are in process on that. And that was approved by council. Obviously, COVID put a kink into them being able to go out and do a lot of the stakeholder engagement that they wanted to do. But as we're moving forward now, I think there's going to be a great opportunity that we can do that in 2021. Stacy, if you have any further thoughts on that interaction with them.
Yeah, no, this is going to be very exciting. I mean, it is your next item, but I think with all these goals and ideas and strategies, sometimes you just need somebody to pull it all together for you. And I think that Kimley Horn is a great consultant to work with. And I think it's going to take a lot of these strategies and bring them all together and create a really great direction for us.
And as we look at signage, again, it's going to be more than just wayfinding. It's going to address a lot of other things as far as, really setting the stage that this is a retail area. But it also, we need to have signage that helps direct people to, the places they want to go, whether it's town hall or the gardens or the sundial, just do a better job on that. And then also there's a safety element too, signage that and how that fits in with making sure that people are protected and that people don't feel like they get lost. People are a little more dangerous when they're lost and frustrated. And so all that's going to go part and parcel together. Activate the gardens during non-event periods. This is an interesting one. This was really how do we monetize or put commercial use into the gardens. And one of the things we're going to start looking at doing is are other ways to monetize the gardens. And maybe it's not necessarily through commercial use, but how do we monetize the Sanderson Lincoln Pavilion and look into the future about how we can use event promoters. And I think that's going to be more of the way that we go along doing that. And so, I've always been hesitant about putting vendors that may take away from our existing brick and mortar, just to monetize the specific gardens. But those are things we can look at. Improve the sight lines through the village center. I don't know if you've looked over the last year, we probably reduced the foliage out there by at least 50%. And you just need to not be able to say 100 Easy Street from Easy Street. When you stand in front of Wild Holly, you can even look over there and see it. And I think we've done a pretty good job of being able to thin that out. And it's just something that we just need to keep doing, because sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees. And it's interesting that was pointed out. It was one of the first things I noticed when I came into town. It's just, and so we'll continue. And I think I think the gardens just look better anyhow when it's just not so overgrown. Develop a logo and slogan to strengthen the Village Center's brand. We've never, as far as I can see, we've never specifically branded the town center any differently than we branded the community. Again, I think it's something that we struggled with. I think it's something that we start looking at. And I think if we start looking at this from more of a neighborhood perspective, I think that may get easier, but it's one of the things that we'll address as an economic development advisory technical plan group. And we'll probably look at that, over the next couple months here. It's one of the things that I've asked them to do, again, is provide imagery. And we're going to start with this imagery of what that looks like. Create comprehensive village center marketing plan. I think the town's always done a good job with creating comprehensive marketing plans, but nothing's ever has been specific to the town center. I'm not sure we even need to do something specific to the town center, since, but I definitely, I'm going to be working with Alex, and we're going to work together on creating more of, putting the communications component together with economic development, business development, marketing, outreach, and advertising, and working with existing businesses to help create. I think we need to get back to having more of a comprehensive marketing plan that needs to be put together. And that was part of the 24-month business plan that I put together, really waiting for the communications person to come on so we can effectively put that together. And we'll bring that to council probably in the next few months, or over the summer. Encourage businesses and organizations to coordinate advertising efforts. I know Alex has been listening in, and I know Gary, and there's a lot of others. This is an interesting one. This is a struggle. And it's something that I think that, it's just going to take a little bit and a lot of communication to help build trust that we're working at the best interest of these businesses. And one of the things that we've always struggled with is having businesses be a participant, and, I guess the term putting skin into the game. And so it's one of the things that we are working on. Sorry. Enhance, where was I? Encourage was enhance web, social media, and e-marketing campaigns. I don't know if you've seen, but Alex has done a phenomenal job. And one of the things that we asked her to do when she first came on was to take over the social media. We know that could be a quick win. We knew that was something that we really needed to take a grab onto that one. And she's going to be doing a presentation later, and she can go in a little bit more detail on that. Leverage local markets to boost the center's commerce. When we went through the process through the Village Center Master Plan, we identified what those markets are. I think it's we start looking at our market. We have our local Carefree market, and then we have the immediate 20-minute market, and then we have kind of this greater Phoenix area, which I'll consider local. We definitely have done a fairly decent job with our local Carefree market, though I still think we can do better. But I think where we really need to focus in on is really looking at the 2 million people that are within 30 minutes of here. And so that's one of the things that we definitely are going to start working towards. One of the things that we've asked, especially specifically with art, and we're going to start talking to the restaurants, is tell us who your customers are and where they do come from, where you want us to target that. So we'll be working with local businesses to do that as well. The managed calendar of events, that's something that we just continuously do. I'm not going to get too much detail on that. Businesses opening year round, that is a long-term goal. And I think there's a lot of effort that needs to get into that. I don't think this town's ever been a 24/7 type town. So whether it's all year round, and we definitely need to start focusing in on, and part of that has to be with just the half of our population leaves during the summer. So again, I think that goes back to identifying other markets where people don't leave and how this is still a great opportunity for them to come up and spend their tax dollars. So, and then the visitor center, we put a lot of effort into this, and Councilmember Croyer brought up that we're changing the green room into a visitor center, and we're getting close to getting that done. And I think that by putting that in the center of town, where people naturally gravitate, where we're going to have misting systems, doors that show visitor center. I mean, it's just people all automatically go to that area to look for information. And I just think it's a home run for us and a natural fit to put that in there. And then being able to have people actually go out and give that personal touch through the ambassadors, I think is just going to be a great way for us to engage. And when we look at the visitor center and the gardens, I've always said this, they are not the end all be all why somebody should come here. The end all be all should be they come here and they go get a dinner, or they go get a lunch, or they pick up a trinket from, one of the shops, or, they want to buy a piece of art. We always need to be this hub and spoke. And I think the visitor center is a great way to get information that allow these people to get out of the gardens, enjoy it while they're along the way. But by the way, there's other great things to do here. Build and sustain a strong downtown network, organizational structure. I think COVID has made that very difficult to start over the last year, but it's something that I think is extremely important. One of the things that we're going to be really focusing on is building off kind of how the Restaurant Association has always, how it operates. And I like the way that they have a loose group, but they're semi-formal, and they have a leader. If we can do that with the various different sectors, the art galleries, we can do that with health and beauty and wellness, and have these groups, and each one of them can have somebody that they could lean on, kind of like they do with Joe at the Restaurant Association. And those folks can represent the various different retail industry groups that we have, clusters that we have. So that's one of the ways that we're going to work on approaching that as we move forward in 2021. I left this one white because we don't have a marketing communication director position. We moved towards economic development, which is going to include marketing. And we also have communications, which also includes marketing. And so obviously taking a more comprehensive look at how we're going to approach, these things. And when you look at economic development, I've said this in the beginning, is that we look at it not just from promotion, but it's also product development. It's also our positioning strategy. And it's also the value proposition that we have to offer. And those four things are things that we continually have to work on. And if you don't have a good communication, conduit to express what you're doing in those fields, or how to get that to either your constituents or your customers, it doesn't matter. So bringing on a communications professional, I think, is going to help really allow us to take all this information and allow us to be a lot more effective. And and that really kind of goes to the final one. I think this is the first update you guys have probably heard on this plan, and it's been a long time. And it's not that we haven't done things, and it's not a fault of anybody on staff or anything like that. I just think it's as economic development, we're going to take ownership of this implementation and moving forward, and work very, very closely with Stacy and the rest of the town center staff, or the town staff, and I think there's a great opportunity to take this information here and what we're doing and all of the great things that have happened as we move into this general plan update. It's just a really good time to address a lot of these things. So observations and next steps. I'd spent some time talking about things that kind of been missing. And really, it really comes down to the heart, the heart of how we do revitalization and how most communities can engage in revitalization. And when you look at this town center master plan, the only thing it doesn't state is this is a redevelopment plan, and like an official state, statute approved, council approved redevelopment plan. It really, and my conversation with the consultant, who I think is actually on this call, is that there was an intention, but because of the town never actually formally adopted a redevelopment boundary or a redevelopment area, that this plan stopped short of actually calling itself a redevelopment plan. And so, it is what it is. And so what I want to talk about, and I think it's important as we move forward, is the idea that and this is really an introduction of that concept of creating a redevelopment area for the town. And we've done most of the heavy lifting already over the last 5 years. And really the next step, from my perspective, is start looking at, the idea of, okay, what is a redevelopment area and what does it mean? And then how do we establish that? And so through state law, a town can establish a redevelopment area, and it has to meet the test in the law says slum or blight requirements. And obviously we don't have slum requirements here, but blight is really kind of an interesting term. And I'll go through what those requirements are on the next slide. As part of any redevelopment area that gets designated by a council, a plan has to be created, and it has to be approved by the planning commission and the town council. And we've created the plan. And so really, I think at this point, one of the things, and obviously that plan probably over 5 years needs to be reevaluated at some level. And so I think that's something we need to do. Now, going back to this idea of meeting the tests for what they call blight, and it really, most of it has to do with inadequate real estate and inadequate infrastructure layout, inadequate planning or platting, I mean. And this town, the town of Carefree inherited this area from the county in a lot of respects. And so there's a lot of things that just don't lay out. And there's a lot of infrastructure decisions that were made over, decades for whatever reason or another. But when you still look around, we do have inadequate and defective street layouts. We have a lot of ownership and diversity of ownership that does make things for development difficult, and odd lot layouts. You look at the lots on Cave Creek Road that are vacant, which is the predominance of vacant lots in town center. And you're like, on a major arterial do you have vacant property? It just doesn't make sense. You'd think that'd be the first stuff that gets developed. So, and then, obsolete platting, if you start looking around, I look at like over at Mariachi Plaza, it's still platted for residential. So those are the things that we need to start just saying, okay, let's start taking more of a comprehensive look at how we can fix some of these things. And this is the test for being able to create the area. I also will say that, I didn't have it highlighted, but when we do look at the pedestrian situation and crossing roadways, even walking in and around town center, there is an issue as it comes to safety. But again, I'm not here to send up alarm bells that we've got massive problems. There's some areas that, that are redevelopment areas that have larger issues than that. So what are the applications of redevelopment area? If you go into Phoenix, who probably uses it more than anybody just because of their size, they have their neighborhood services, who uses it a lot for rehabilitation of housing, where they've gone in neighborhoods and have just, and have bought up significant properties and homes, and then have redeveloped those areas. And there's also commercial revitalization or commercial redevelopment. You look at Phoenix Sky Harbor Center, for example. It's a 500-acre business park, or the Peoria Sports Complex, which was all vacant land before the creation of that redevelopment area. And I actually worked specifically on this area. And it was primarily for the creation of commercial around the spring training facility. The most recent one that you probably read about is Paradise Valley Mall. Is going to be a project-specific redevelopment area, and they're going to be looking at adding mixed-use component to their and completely redeveloping that particular site. So there's lots of ways that these get used, and And so one of the things is you always get asked, well, gosh, does it really, what does this mean? Does it impact property values? And in almost every case that I've ever witnessed in my experiences, it's only benefited the properties in and around a redevelopment area, because what devalues properties is things in neglect. And a redevelopment area addresses things that are in neglect. And so it just allows us the opportunity to be able to address it in a comprehensive and productive manner. And then the other thing is, and this goes back to this neighborhood concept, is it supports the creation of housing diversity. And when you go through the Baker study or the Village Center Master Plan, when I looked at the notes and some of the comments, one of the things that routinely came up was, I live in Carefree. I may not be able to always support my large single family house on 5 acres of land, but I still want to live in the Carefree area. I still want to be in Carefree, and I don't want to go into an old folks home. One of the themes that was running through there, and as we look at sustainability, we have a great opportunity to create housing in this particular area that, let's say somebody can't drive. We have all the necessities around. It really is conducive to creating that type of environment that allows our residents to have a different, diverse opportunity to live here. So it's one of the things I think when we look at the idea of creating a redevelopment area and going through the general plan update, that we need to take a serious look at. And again, when I talked with the EdTap group, this is one of the things they really hit as a highlight, because housing diversity really helps support local commercial. The benefits and tools, the largest benefit, one of the largest benefits is our ability to buy and sell land. And I talked about this earlier. And this allows us to put a real estate strategy together. And just like Peoria did with the sports complex, they were able to buy and sell to commercial development. They leased some of this, anything in and around the sports complex was on a long-term ground lease. I did 3 or 4 of them myself. And it really helps take that area from just being orange grove to what it is today, which is a highly performing commercial area. And I think that's significant. The one thing it does allow, and this is a sensitive subject when we ever talk about redevelopment, is eminent domain. And the law allows communities to go in and to be able to condemn property. And within a redevelopment area, you can condemn for purposes of revitalization. So let's say we designate an area for redevelopment. You can pick up additional properties that maybe there's a holdout. And where it gets a little sticky is if there's an existing use in a specific property. And some communities have refrained from using eminent domain where there's existing uses. Some don't. City of Phoenix, I personally helped relocate several businesses when we did the stadium for the baseball facility and the adjacent parking structure, and help relocate some of those businesses. And in those cases, they were all friendly condemnations where the businesses were accepting. But there are cases where that's not been the case in other communities. And so it's one of the things as we go through this process that I definitely, or as a group, we be conscious of and have a conversation around. The next one is being able to create public and private partnerships. And this is a key as well. State law, and especially now that there was that recent court case, again with Peoria and the Goldwater Institute, where it really honed in on a city's ability to provide funding for private projects. Outside of a redevelopment area, it's extremely difficult. And so we need to be conscious about the gifting clause, but inside a redevelopment area, we have a lot more flexibility on being able to do that as if it meets the redevelopment criteria or the goals of the redevelopment area plan that have been established. So for instance, some of the types of projects we put together was a matching fund for revitalization, where if a business puts in X amount of dollars, maybe $30,000, $40,000, the community can put in 50% matching funds up to a certain dollar amount, or however that program gets established, and that can go directly into the private property for revitalization efforts. So it's for physical or for safety issues, or if it helps that property become more productive as well by allowing more tenants to get into that particular The other is we can actually go into joint property or joint ventureship with some developers, and work closely with them on how we can fund and build projects. It also gives us access to community development block grant funds or CDBG funds. The county is issued some of these. Most of those are used for programs that help people in areas where maybe they can't pay their power bill or their water bill. For the most part, that's the way those programs at the county have been set up. But there are funds that the federal government can put out, and a lot of those have to deal with being able to solve ADA issues, specifically with pedestrian walkways. And so I was actually talking to some folks, my contemporaries, and they've been successful in getting those types of grants. And then it also allows for a lot wider array of financing tools. The interesting thing is that bonds that get issued through for redevelopment type projects don't have an impact on the bonding capacity of a town. That's actually separated. And then that the town's budget and expenditure limit isn't impacted by that as well. So these deals would be looked at separately as we look at those types of projects. And then we also have the ability then to create CC&Rs and design guidelines specific to projects. So if we go out to RFP for a particular project, we control how that gets developed, how that looks. Again, going back to the town hall site, if we were to go to bid and just sell the property, there's nothing that says that somebody wouldn't come in and just occupy the space or do something that fits in with zoning but doesn't meet really what we're looking for. But if we go through an RFP process, we can control almost every aspect of how that thing is going to be looked, the uses, how it looks, how it fits in with the character of the area. So again, the steps that typically when I talk to my contemporaries, so well, the first thing you need to do is a ULI study. Well, we did that. And then the next thing they says, well, you need to go through the process and really do a formal process for creating a redevelopment plan and understanding, and we did that. And so we've had over a time period, we had a lot of stakeholder engagement. And I've brought this up with property owners and some other folks who have been engaged in these types of things. And they said, oh, please just don't make us go through this. We've already gone through all of this. We need to move forward. And so, I think we really do have a strong backbone for what we've done. And I think it's extremely still relevant to where we are today. And so the next steps then is we looked at a town council initial finding and designated an area to consider for redevelopment. One of the things that I talked to Gary about was maybe, prior to doing that, we can look at having some type of workshop with the planning commission, and maybe that's a next step. But formally, the next step would be doing the initial finding, and then we just designate that area. We would have to notify all the property owners prior to doing that, and I've already started just doing informal outreach to property owners as well. And I've probably talked to about, I'm going to say at least 50 to 60% of the property owners, and had no pushback up to this date. But obviously, we need to do formal notification. Once town council has the initial designated area set, we go and we create the redevelopment plan. My recommendation would be just to update our current existing plan and go through that process. You also can create a redevelopment commission. Some communities have them, some don't. I've never worked with a redevelopment commission in the times that I've worked for the cities I've worked for. I know Gilbert does have one. I didn't get a chance to talk to him about how the mechanic works. But with being such a small community, I'm not sure that it's necessary. We can really rely heavily upon the Economic Development Advisory Group, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then obviously Council. And then going through the process, we have Planning Commission approval and Town Council approval. And so there's a lot of steps that take us to get through this. And so, but it doesn't mean that, this is a 5 or 6 year process. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting, and my goal would be to try to get something done by the end of this year and prior to going into the general plan update, because I think a lot of the conversation can necessitate how we're going to address the general plan update. The redevelopment plan will have a statement of boundaries. These are just some of the things here. I'm not going to just read through them. But I would go to venture to let you know that most of the things that are included in this list have already been completed or included in the Village Center master plan that we have. One of the things that we would have to do is a lot of it's just listed as recommendations. Instead of recommendations, we would have to change that plan and say these are actual strategies. So, that's part of the update. The boundary that I'm looking at would include the town center that we've always recognized. I would expand that boundary to the north side of Cave Creek, or the northeast side of Cave Creek, and then the west side of Tom Darlington, to make sure that we include the right-of-ways as we look at redevelopment with all the things that we're doing in the right-of-way right now as it relates to pedestrian access to the adjacent neighborhoods. And then I also would include Mariachi Plaza and the warehouse space in behind that, which includes our own facilities there. There's just stuff that I think was built probably in the county. And when we look at it, I've always struggled with the idea, do we include this in town center, do we not? And looking further into how we connect pedestrians and I think there's a great opportunity for this area to be redeveloped over time. And really attach it into the town center fold. I want to stop here. Does anybody have any questions as it relates to any of this? It's been a mouthful, I know, but I really want to start to educate you and anybody who's interested in this. I want to run a full, transparent conversation on this because I think it's important. Do that, and I want people to understand how this could be a powerful tool for the community.
Steve, it's Steve Hatcher. Do you have in mind 2 or 3 particular areas for this redevelopment process that you were discussing? Because that seems like a really excellent tool to be able to get some of these areas that we have in our immediate town area that have been dead for a while. And you make a very good point that, pardon me one second, very good point in that we really don't have control of all the real estate that in our community, which allows us to, as you say, tailor its development and how it integrates with our future business model. So I'm very excited about this type of process you've proposed.
Hey, Councilman Hatcher, Mayor. It's interesting, in the initial plan, and I wish I brought this graphic up, they showed specific sites for redevelopment, including Town Center, 100 Easy Street. When we start looking at this and we start designating areas, and so, for instance, I think Town Center has a higher and best use, 100 Easy Street. And that's why I try to look at it is what areas have higher and best use. When we look at the Shell station on the corner, obviously, I think there's not a person that drives by that doesn't go, wow, that's underwhelming, right? But it's nothing against the ownership of that. It's nothing against the use. It's been there for a very long time. But when we start looking at areas like that, that's a key visual to the town. So those are areas we can start looking at. And Mariachi Plaza, how does that integrate potentially with the area behind that? When we start looking at Ed Everett as maybe even being, maybe this is an area for a municipal complex. We already have uses over there. So I just think we just need to start opening the door to the realms of possibility. And when we start doing that and we start designating it and we formally put it out there, if I'm an investor, I have a lot higher confidence that I can have a good vision here and I can look at something and that there's tools in place that allow me to affect that. And Spanish Village is a great example. I mean, Bruce did a good job at revitalization, but boy, if he could have picked up that vacant property adjacent to Cave Creek Road, it could have been a lot. He could have done a lot more, And so and there's just no way for us to get engaged in that process. There was no way to expand beyond the boundaries of what Spanish Village is now. But I think there's a lot of vision of what Spanish Village could ultimately be. Another example would be, when we look at Carefree Plaza and the vacant property behind that, who's to say that down in the future that you can't combine those properties with the alleyway that we own in between and do a single project that gets integrated not only on Carefree Drive, but is more of a singular project or mixed use project that then has more appeal, that can push itself all the way up to Easy Street. And so those are things that we just need to start thinking out of the box, and we can establish that as we go through the process of the redevelopment plan itself and start, updating that and reevaluating it.
So that was a long yes.
It was a long yes, but and I apologize, I'm taking time here, but I think this is an important thing, and so I don't want to rush through it, and I appreciate the patience and time.
Well, you've done an excellent job of I think broadening our thinking and showing us what is possible, and starting to lay out probably the most reasonable path for us to get there. So I think there's a lot of work, as you mentioned, ahead of us. On the next steps and everything related to that. And I know there's always a lot of stop starts. Somebody gives you an idea when you're halfway through it that's better than where you're headed, and then you go back and redo it. So this is excellent.
Thanks. And so I think the next step for us would be, is to work and see if we can put a planning commission workshop together, have the Economic Development Advisory Group be part of that. But before we did that, I wanted to just get your thoughts on this. So this is a direction for us to move forward on. And just in general, I know there's no vote on it. It was just more of a, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? And if it is, then I'd like to set that up and maybe start, over the next month or two. And if we could try to push for something that we could do by the end of the year.
Well, I would say, Steve, that as usual, you've done an excellent job with your presentation. I guess if we look to the future, we see to the west of us at the 17 and Carefree Highway, a $12 billion chip plant and a huge tech center. And then we go to the east of us and we look at Pima Road and the thousands of houses that Scottsdale's got programmed. We have to control our destiny best we can. I mean, we have an opportunity. We're going to be a premier area that people are going to want to come to. And I think that the quicker we can get ahead of it, the better we'll be served.
Great.
And Steve, what's your level of confidence in being able to implement successfully this by defining a redevelopment area and being able to get legal control and access to these properties that we are, hamstrung by because the owners won't do anything with. We have, as you said, we have empty lots that could be developed and integrated with existing properties and other properties that have been, decaying over time and not adding any economic value to our community. Is this the arrow we've been looking for to get this done?
And that's a great question, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's not a silver bullet. But what it does is it allows the town to step in and fix deficiencies. And so, where we have areas where, maybe we just need to plug the gap, or there's an infrastructure piece that we need to include that would help make something happen, or if there's a property that we own that could affect it, or if there's an opportunity when we're looking forward that we pick up a piece of property that we know that we can hold on to and package that maybe with an adjacent owner who's interested in flipping and doing redevelopment. So it allows us to package deals that way. So is it a silver bullet? No, but does it allow us a lot more flexibility to work with the existing property owners? Yeah, it does. And it's been my experience, and we've been able to do a lot of great projects it takes a little bit of time, but with where we're at right now, we have no ability to, like as Tony said, or Councilman Geiger said, to control our future, our destiny.
Nice body of work there, Steve.
Thank you.
And Stacy, of course.
Yeah.
I think it's outstanding. It gives us a framework to think through this and a plan to move ahead. So I would suggest that each of us on the council sit down with you within the next month and talk it specifically and just keep us involved and tell us how we can help. And
okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. And thank you for your patience.
Oh,
it was a lot of information to present, but I think it gives us a lot of ideas and it's sending us in a direction that we've never contemplated before. So it looks like a great start.
Thank you.
Anything else? If not, thank you, Steve. And going on to item number 11, review, discussion, and possible action to approve the amendment to the existing contract comprehensive sign plan contract with Kimley Horn for $63,500 to include circulation and parking analysis and recommendations. I believe this is Stacy who will lead us through this section.
Oh, no, you get me again, Mayor.
There's Steve.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Stacy. Didn't mean to cut you off there. I thought you left. I didn't see you on here anymore.
I'm here.
All right. Yeah. So, and Stacy, maybe if you could, just kind of run through the, how we got here with Kimley Horn. I know you were more involved in the original on that.
Sure. Well, first of all, it was very exciting to actually contract with Kimley Horn. We went through, as many of the council members know, an evaluative process, and I think we ended up with a wonderful consultant with the original intention of creating a comprehensive signage plan. As Steve presented in his last presentation, we've always had these efforts. We've kind of done piecemeal, but not in a bad way. I think just kind of doing the best we could with the tools that we had. But I think it just came to light that this is a point where we have these wonderful gateways. We need to really figure out how to utilize entry points, how to utilize circulation that we have today, understanding how much parking we have, and figure out the best way to bring people in and guide them through town center. So with Steve coming in and bringing his enthusiasm and looking with kind of a different eye at town center, in fact, we even had early conversations, what about these connections? What about this space? And all of a sudden, and then with the idea of what could Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road look like if we really thought about really inclusively parking and circulation and even land development. So I think the thought was, and I don't want to, take away your thunder, the presentation, but was to utilize, we'll find a consultant, but then we thought, well, why don't we use the expert that we have and expand the scope of what they're looking at to be more inclusive.
That was Steve's presentation. So
You just did my presentation. Thank you.
Maybe next time, Steve, we'll consult a little bit better there.
Yeah.
So with that said, look at the contract.
Steve, you could have done your presentation, man.
Yeah. So, well, and I think that, that I think the original contract was approved last March. Mm-hmm. So we sat on this for about a year, and I know some of the council members were a little itchy about moving forward on it. Obviously, COVID has a huge impact on stakeholder engagement again. So, I think it gave us a great opportunity to kind of reevaluate. And then when we looked at the contract that Kimley Horn had, there is a provision for us to be able to amend the contract and change the scope. And I think, because this was done under a request for qualifications, it really came down to the idea that, we picked them because they're the most qualified. And so we asked for them for another proposal to add the circulation and signage component. And it really comes down to the idea of we shouldn't look at this statically. We have to look at things dynamically. And if we're going to be looking at making changes, the hotel and pedestrian access and streets and striping and all this other stuff, it really makes sense to start saying, okay, well, how does all that fit together? And how, if you're going to have a signage plan, it really needs to reflect the fluid movement of how we're going to be developing over the next, 5 years or so. And so, and I know I was on the walk with Rick Engineering when we were talking about these, the improvements or the changes he was looking for safety. And we started having these kind of off, conversations about, well, gosh, what does all this mean, right? And what can we do? And how does that fit in with the ultimate goal of maybe looking at providing more parking or better utilizing our right-of-way to solve multiple problems that we have with town center. And so with this particular request, really what we've asked them to do is go through, look at the parking situation, because I think the hotel is going to have an impact on parking behavior. and then how people are going to be able to access existing parking, and they're going to be doing that. And then what we want to do also is have them focus on circulation in and around town center, and also look at those right of ways, Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road, as we've discussed, and get us to a point where we can have a really nice conceptual vision of how all that circulation gets put together and how it fits together with a comprehensive signage package. And then also get us to a point, because part of the problem with plans is they never get to a point where you can actually implement something. So we're asked to go a little step further and get us to 15% construction drawings that will allow us to put a cost estimate to all this. I mean, because it's always the biggest part. Okay, this is great, well, what's it going to cost us? And so once we get to that point, then it makes it easier to approach property owners and say, hey, this is what we're looking to do. This is what it's going to cost. This is how it benefits you. You want to help. These are the financing mechanisms we can engage in. What's your interest? And we can have a better conversation around that. So I think that's what we're trying to get to with this. And then one thing that we did ask through the process is, because we already had things built into the original scope, was how much of that cost could be shared in stakeholder engagement. And so that's one of the things, when you look at the cost that's on there, is included in that. This is the schedule that they put together, and we do have somebody from Kimley Horn, I think, did jump on. I don't know if we could have access to talk about that, but this is the process here, and I don't know how much this overlaps the existing signage, but I'm pretty sure there's overlap. I don't know, Stacy, if you just are seeing this for the first time, so. But I'm sure.
Well, I think the point is now, I think it's kind of coming together. I mean, I think these things don't happen separately. They kind of happen, like you said, in a fluid and collective manner. So.
Yep.
Oh, and I see Rebecca's on. Maybe she can talk a little bit.
I am, yes. I'm not sure if you all can hear me. If I have access. Okay, perfect. So good evening. Thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to be here to discuss this all with you. As Steve mentioned, this is the schedule. It's a generic schedule. You'll just see month 1 through 8 on the top there, just not knowing exactly when this would start. But we're looking at really a 6-month process from start to finish. And it would be concurrent with our scope of work that includes the wayfinding and signage plan. So as was mentioned, a lot of what we are hoping to achieve as part of this is combining the data collection phases, the information gathering, field review, and the stakeholder engagement sessions all into one project that will enable us to share resources between the 2 different efforts that are moving forward. And they really have the same goal, which is increasing the walkability, increasing the pedestrian environment there within town center. So that would be happening along with our parking evaluation. We have a whole team of parking specialists that look at occupancy rates and evaluate how to best modify an existing parking network to best suit a community's needs. So those would be the activities that would be happening in the first month of our efforts. And then moving forward, we would move into a project assessment phase in combination with the wayfinding and signage package that would look at existing conditions and then start to create those high-level schematic design drawings, those 15% options for consideration. We would have a couple of alternatives. We looked at creating a menu of options for the parking condition along the roadways, creating typical sections for review, and then really putting together all of this into a cost estimate so that you can see what it's going to be moving forward and what the implications are from a funding perspective. So the plan process, the high-level schematic design is a couple months, and again with an estimated completion in a 6-month start to finish timeframe.
So Steve, I can't find it right now, but in the information that was in my packet tonight, it looked like Kimley and Horn was also going to be looking at the number of lanes on Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road. which is also what Rick Engineering is doing as a part of the crosswalk assessment. So I just want to make sure we're not duplicating the efforts.
So, Councilmember Cryer, the idea here, and I've talked about this a little bit with Rebecca, is to have a further conversation with Rick Engineering about how he's looking at, part of what he's recommending is maybe some restriping, movement of medians and all that. And I think there's nothing that's going to be massively changing the right of way as far as, pavement and drainage and all those other things with Rick. It's going to be more recommendations that change traffic behavior.
It's also going from 2 lanes to 1 lane. Right, Stacy, if I remember when we did the walkabout a couple of weeks ago, there were a number of areas we were talking about going from 2 lanes to 1 lane on both Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road.
Mayor Peterson, Councilmember Coyer, that's correct. What's interesting a little bit about that is I think the crosswalk study, and we talked to Rick Engineering about this, is to try to, in a sense, isolate those crossings and design them in a way that when Rebecca's team looks at some of these other strategies in terms of adding parking or how else to use the quote rest of our right of way, it doesn't necessarily negate the work that Rick Engineering is doing. So it's almost kind of it's an expansion of Rick Engineering's work, I would say, as well, but including the time and the effort and the designs that they've done into sort of the Kimley Horn sort of direction.
So would there be some cross meetings to make sure that it was all working together?
Well, probably Rebecca could answer that better, but I definitely believe that, they'll be studying the information that Rick Engineering has performed. But I think maybe Rebecca, you might want to answer that.
Sure. So we would be looking at the information that was presented, specifically the traffic analysis that is happening as part of the Rick Engineering plan, because that is not included in the scope of work, but that we have presented. But what that's done is it's giving the data to show how the reduction in lane is a feasible alternative. And so that helps us then move forward with using that extra space now that is created by that lane reduction. So we're looking at it as an existing condition in a way that we've now received the buy-off from a traffic perspective that it can be reduced in certain areas. And then knowing that we have the flexibility and the freedom to look beyond that within the right of way for the parking additions and the other streetscape improvements that we would be recommending. So it's a complementary piece from our perspective and not a duplication, in that we're not including that type of analysis in our scope of work.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Rebecca, did you have any more comments on the schedule at all, or?
This no, really, it's we're hoping to really get moving now. We've been excited to hear that things are moving forward again. We've been, as Steve mentioned, it's been a while since I was at the last council meeting where we had approval of the contract, and then things kind of hit with COVID right after that. So we're looking forward to getting started, and the key is really to get the stakeholder engagement session scheduled, to get out there and start doing some of our site investigations and really getting moving with this, and really paired with the hotel and the implementation of that. And the timing actually has worked out very well so that we can see the impacts of that as we're moving into this phase of the project.
And Rebecca, with COVID and doing stakeholder engagement, where does that stand today? I mean, with COVID, such a fluid thing right now.
Yeah, so we over the last year, we've definitely had to be creative, and we've kept things moving from a community outreach perspective in ways that have really been more successful than even anticipated. We have seen walk and talks, that we call it, where we have outdoor engagement sessions with the community, socially distanced with masks, individual handouts versus having people gather around boards or roll plots. That has been successful. We also have a very robust web-based technology that can have survey data be released to members of the community, and they have opportunities to look at concepts, to give feedback, to kind of zoom in and select certain areas for review. So those are a couple of the strategies that we've been using over this last year, and it's really served us well for a lot of our community outreach projects.
And then finally, here's I know on the initial council packet, this page, the page with all the numbers on it was missing. Thank you, Vice Mayor Crane, for pointing that out. And so I think we got the packets amended, but just in case nobody saw it, I wanted to make sure that the final page was displayed so you can see, you know, where this, how this was put together, and if you had any questions regarding the schedule here.
So Stephen and Stacy, these are the costs and the timing that you and the scope that you have worked out. And it is your recommendation that the council approve an extension, an amendment to the existing comprehensive sign plan contract with Kimley Horn in the amount of $63,500. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor.
And then what is the total cost with the other the original contract?
$137,810.
Say that again, please.
$137,810.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or discussions from the council members?
I had one question for Rebecca. In the previous diagram, the stakeholder engagement, is that a dialogue with all the business owners?
Yes, so there are a couple of outreach sessions that we planned for this. One of them was included in our previous project scope of work, and so this is a second engagement session. And it would include outreach to the business owners to understand the impacts that some of these improvements may have on the operations of their business. And so this particular meeting shown in this scope of work is to present the ideas that have been generated for the area to the business owners and to the community so that they can see what the implications are. The first engagement session as part of our original scope of work is to get feedback on the area from the residents and from the business community as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Is there anyone who would make that motion, which we discussed before, an amendment to the existing comprehensive sign plan contract with Kimley Horn in the amount of $63,500?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Candace, would you please poll the council members?
Yes, Councilmember Cray, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Croyer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Hatcher, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember D'Alicio, are you still with us?
I think he's
I believe-
gone.
Yeah, he had to leave at 6:30. Councilmember Geiger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Crane, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Mayor Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
It's a
So
vote
by
of
6-0. Excuse me, Candace, go ahead.
No, you haven't, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so we will pass that by a vote of 6-0. Thank you. We look forward to the participating in the results of that study.